There's much to talk about. Joining us from the United Nations in New York is Majeed Gly. He's the UN Chief Correspondent and a columnist for the Rudaw Media Network. Ahmed Rushdi is with us from Baghdad. He's a political analyst and foreign policy advisor to the Speaker of the Iraqi Parliament and the Director of the House of Iraqi Expertise Foundation. Kamran Bokhari is a senior fellow and the Director of Political Affairs at the Center for Global Policy. And Mazin Al-Eshaiker is the chairman of the Injah Development Center, a Baghdad-based think tank and a former advisor to the Iraqi Prime Minister's office. Thanks to all of you for being with us. Mazin, let me start with you. Iraqi television is reporting that Mosul has fallen, the caliphate is over. Iraqi troops, according to these reports, have taken over the main mosque in the city as well. What do you make of these developments?
Well, yeah, congratulations to the entire nation of Iraq for all the great sacrifices. The number is exceeding 41,000 killed between civilians and Iraqi security forces. Unfortunately, what Iraq will have is a rubble where the Nouri, not Nouri al-Maliki, but the Nouri mosque that was bombed by ISIS, as well as all the orphans and the widows that Iraq has to bear after all these years, since 2004. The question is not, the liberation of Iraq from, or basically the liberation of Mosul. There are 3 other places in Iraq that still has active ISIS militias, such as Hawija, Al-Afar, and Al-Qa'im. So Iraq is not fully liberated from ISIS, but hopefully in the next few weeks it will.
Ahmed Rushdi, retaking a city and pushing ISIL out is one thing. Question is, are Iraqi forces going to be able to hold the city? Are they in for what could be a long haul here?
First of all, it is one of the glorious days of Iraq, is that we Daesh vanished from Mosul, which means that the stronghold of Daesh is already in the hands of the Iraqis again and again. That means all the sacrifices that happen before 2 years, for the whole long 2 years, is actually get paid by the complete liberation of Mosul. It is the beginning of the liberation of the all territories of Iraq. This is certain. And the most important thing is that what's going to happen after that. And I think it's supposed to be there is a plan between the central, the local, the central government and also the local government, with the help of the international community, to start to deal up with the post-ISIS era problems in Mosul.
Kamran, this is an asymmetric war. These are not conventional forces here. We're not going to have a group of generals who are going to be surrendering. Is this the beginning of the end for ISIL, or could they just regroup and come back another day?
I wish I shared that optimism. I don't, because we've been here before, and we were here in, when the predecessor to ISIS at the time in 2005 was kicked out of Fallujah, only to come back. Again, it was kicked out in 2008, and then in 2012 it came back and expanded into Syria. It is much bigger than what it used to be. It has survived decapitation attacks. It has grown into a monster. And the problem is that the underlying conditions that produced Daesh, that produced ISIS, are not going away. Who has liberated Mosul from Daesh? It is a Shia-dominated military force. That worsens sectarianism. I hope that the Iraqis, Sunnis, and Shia and the Kurds get together and have some sort of a political compact to move forward and really push and make a dent against ISIS. I'm not hopeful, because sectarianism, as you see around the region, is only getting more polarized.
Right, so those conditions, as you say, still exist. That's going to be a major challenge for the government here. Absolutely,
absolutely. I mean, this is the first time ever that a Shia-dominated force is now controlling Mosul. Yes, there are Sunnis fighting, but the Sunnis are a shattered community between old supporters of Daesh, the Ba'ath Party, right, the tribes, the various regional players. The Sunnis are not like a cohesive whole. And if you don't have a cohesiveness within at the intra-Sunni level, how will you have an inter-ethno-sectarian balance of power?
Okay, let me bring in Majeed from the United Nations. Majeed, in Syria, there's a Kurdish-led coalition there that's advancing on Raqqa, which is the de facto capital of this caliphate that ISIL tried to create. But Syria, of course, is a very complex situation. The United States is involved in there, Russia is involved in there. If this Kurdish faction prevails in Raqqa, how much of a turning point will that be?
It will be certainly a major turning point, and at the end of ISIS in Raqqa will basically will have a major symbolic, I would say, failure for ISIS, a major blow for ISIS, as it is in Mosul. But Raqqa is their self-styled capital of their caliphate, and it will bring the questions that are the nature of the fights that we are seeing militarily is not much different when we see in Mosul and in Raqqa, but the big difference between both fights are the questions about what will happen after those areas are liberated and taken back from ISIS. In Raqqa, the question is more geopolitical. It's between, we are already seeing not just US-backed Kurdish forces that are trying to take back the countryside of Raqqa, but also Russia and Iranian-backed forces already started, especially from south of Aleppo, going toward the city of Raqqa. So we are seeing US-backed forces from the eastern side of Raqqa trying to take back the city, and you're seeing from the western side Russia and Iranian-backed Syrian forces and other militias. They're trying to take assert their control on this area. So it's quickly turning into a geopolitical battle, and the future of this is not clear. And frankly, as some diplomats here at the United Nations say, it's very worrying, especially between the United States and Russia. How will they arrange this relationship after Raqqa is taken, or even during the fight to take back the city?
Mazin, let's get back to Iraq and look at some of the points that Kamran Bokhari raised, and that is the conditions that led to the rise of a group like ISIL, or Daesh as it's called, still exist in the country. How is the government going to be able to overcome this?
And there's news for you. It's getting even worse. The problem that most of the world looks at Iraq as if there is, your red, white, and blue. No, Iraqis are not just Sunni, Shia, and Kurds. Iraqis are obviously a lot more diverse than that. The problem is in Iraq, the root cause of all the problems in the whole region is corruption in Iraq. And this is what led to this sectarian war, which led into the fall of Mosul, which led into the formation of ISIS, and then the refugees went to Europe, and then there is terrorism in Europe. If you have a root cause analysis of all these problems, it goes back to this era of our former prime minister, the last 8 years that he ruled the country with full corruption. It is not just the small corruption that you hear here and there. $312 billion were stolen from the Iraqi budget during those 8 years. And that former prime minister managed to release 1,200 Al-Qaeda prisoners from Abu Ghraib. He released them to form ISIS. He moved $450 million from the Iraqi central bank in Baghdad to Mosul to prepare it for ISIS. He moved $27 billion worth of brand new American hardware, machinery, weaponry that we received, moved it to Mosul to prepare for the start of ISIS. There was a grand plan to form ISIS in Iraq that the previous US administration was involved in and the previous Iraqi government was involved in. This is more than just a few hundred hooligans that crossed the borders and formed a government. It's a huge thing.
Right, Ahmed Rushdi, as we're hearing, this is a very complex situation in Iraq right now. It's not just a matter of driving ISIL out of these cities. Do you believe the central government has some plan in place, is capable of bringing these sides together? I mean, as Mazin points out, this is a country with disparate groups. You know, there's Sunnis, there's Kurds, there's Shias, and, we can add in, of course, Christians and minority Yazidis as well.
Yazidis and Shabak and so on. There are so many minorities in Mosul. First of all, I'm totally agree with what Mr. Mazin said. It's that it's a very complicated situation, and our government must have a plan, or else it means that we all know that Daesh is already presented maybe on sleeping cells or maybe in the deserts. They all will wait. They will wait for the failure to be done again and again and again, starting from corruption, starting from the disputes between the diversity of political parties, ethnicity, and so on. That's why I think the international community must push the Iraqi government to be, first of all, inclusive. Second thing is that to have a right plan to manipulate all these things, all these complications that inside the Sunni society. Now, it's not only rebuilding the city, it's fighting the ideology. How are you going to fight the ideology if you cannot convince people that they have the right to share the power in their own territories for the sake of Iraq, for the unity of Iraq? Now, all these issues must have a real efforts from the Iraqi government. Campaigns must be launched on these issues, nationality campaigns, try to manage things on the way that all the people that are displaced must return to homes safe and sound. They will have infrastructures. They will have their own rights in education, in employment, and working hard inside their cities, and more investments. The Iraqi government must encourage the international community to have more investments in these cities, in these destroyed cities, because it will be there. Disease, poverty, and ignorance will be there if we didn't manage to rehabilitate the whole society in these damaged areas. Now, what we want is actually at the end to reach up a health society which has three main tasks. Number one, fighting terrorism. Number two, sit down with the partners and share authorities inside our country. And number three, have a good regional and international relations. Now, to reach up such a society, there must be lots of work, there must be lots of hands from the Iraqi government, from the local government, from the regional powers, and also from the international community.
Okay, I want our discussion to continue on those points that you've raised there, but first we are going to take a break. More of our conversation when we return. Stay with us, you're watching The Heat.